A concept that you frequently see in all kinds of social sciences is the idea of a black box. And a black box is something where you put an input into and then you get an output, but you really have no idea how it came to that conclusion. You have no idea how it was calculated. You can sometimes get an understanding that if you put an A, you get C, but B remains a complete and total mystery. And this concept might be the most prevalent when it comes to international relations because certain IR theories, particularly realists, view other states as black boxes where we can't ever truly know what the processes are within that state that make specific decisions. But I think a more practical application of the concept is when you're dealing with other people, particularly people who you don't have a close relationship with. To a certain extent, even your friends, your family, your spouse is a bit of a black box to you. You can probably read what their emotions are. You have some idea what makes them tick, but you don't necessarily know what's bothering them or what's making them happy specifically at any given time. You might think that they're upset about their life situation or something that happened at work, but they might just have low blood sugar because they weren't able to eat their lunch on time. So, not to say you can't get to know people and you can't penetrate the black box, at least to a certain extent, but you always have to be very careful when you start looking at things from that perspective. Probably a more pure example of this is when you're dealing with people who you might have a passing familiarity with, classmates, people at your work, specifically people you might meet at church or at a store or an organization you're part of or a political party or something. You might have a very basic understanding of these people just by extrapolating from things they say, from their background, from certain personality traits they have. But ultimately, you really have no idea what's going on inside their head, and you have no idea what the person actually is like inside of the black box. All that you can see is the outside of it. And very often, this is not a reliable way of determining what a person's actually like. Because by and large, people try as much as possible to present the best image they can to other people who they come across. People generally don't like to show weakness. So if they're upset or depressed or poor or have a variety of other personal problems, you can sometimes tell that. But very often they'll try to appear cheerful, confident, happy, like nothing really bothers them. They might be rather poor or of modest means, but they might wear really nice clothes and really do their appearance up to kind of give the impression that they're doing a lot better than they are. And when you're dealing with this person, like I said, you can't see inside them. You can't see what their actual life situation. You can't see what their actual feelings are. So you just have to go from the surface impression. And while this is logical and really the only way you can go about it, something you have to keep in mind is since you don't understand what's inside the person, you tend to fill the person up with whatever your personal pathologies are. So if you're someone who has extremely low self esteem, you tend to think that the other person is full of confidence, that they've got their lives together, that they have a GF, that they're doing well off financially. It's kind of the same, like if you have an illness, you might see the other person as being someone who, oh, they don't have an illness, they aren't disabled in the same way I am. They like the person, even when they kind of present themselves, they won't say like, oh, my father's an alcoholic. They'll talk about a positive family relationship, like, oh, I'm having this great time with my uncle last week. And you'll get this impression that they maybe have a really good family life, and you'll think they have a better one than yours. But in reality, it can often be a lot worse. And the other person is often more full of insecurities, at least on certain topics, than you are. But because you can't see that, you tend to project your own kind of pathologies and your own worldview onto other people. And the inverse is true, which I don't have a lot of experience of. But if you're someone who tends to be very prideful and very confident, you might project the inverse on other people. You might see them as weak, incompetent. You might just assume they don't know what they're doing. if they aren't acting kind of up to your particular standard, not necessarily if they're not competent at their job or they're not good at what they do, but they're not acting in the precise way that you would like them to, you view the inside of the black box as being effective. This is an issue a lot of leaders have where they assume that the same input will work for all workers. That is, the same management style will work for all people. Some people are generally speaking better at working on their own, so you just need to give them guidance, and if they come to you and ask you questions, you respond to that. But generally speaking, you don't need to micromanage them. Some people need a lot of micromanagement, a lot of direct management, and that's not to say they aren't efficient, but there's just a different way of having to deal with them than you might have to deal with other people. And I think people can get the idea, and this is kind of encouraged by a lot of the school system, that you have to put the same input into all your employees because you'll get the exact same result. And sometimes certain things that might help other people, like team building activities, corporate events, or stuff like that, that might energize certain people and make them work harder and help them. It might also turn certain people off and make them upset and make them not want to work for the company anymore. If I can make a slight digression, I think this is one of the key problems with the modern education system is the idea that the same input will generate the same result in all students. Even if you discount things like IQ and learning disabilities, people just learn in different ways. Some people learn better by doing. Some people learn better if it's verbally explained to them or they read the instructions. Some people learn better if they look at a picture of it. Because I know back in university, when I was working with accessible learning at my school, they had some suggestions. They're like, some people, if they write their notes on certain color coded paper, that really helps them because they tend to think in a more visual fashion. Associating concepts with certain images or colors is extremely helpful for them. Me personally, what they found is I'm an auditory learner. So being able to convert my textbooks into speech and listen to them helped me remember things and learn a lot faster. My point being, though, you probably can't tell that just by looking at some. You probably can't tell, like, if you sit someone down and you try to use how something works for you, like if you're an auditory learner and you try to explain it to them in words and they can't really follow it, there's a tendency to maybe see, oh, well, they're defective because your input isn't working properly. But the truth of the matter is, they might not be dumb or defective at all. They might just be very different, and their brain might function in a very different fashion. And so I think this is just a perspective you really have to keep in mind that when you're dealing with other people and you don't know their life situations, they're trying to put their best foot forward. They're trying to behave in a fashion that shows that there's nothing wrong with them personally, that they're strong, that they're successful, that they're stable, and their lives are stable. But it might be that all those aspects are a complete and total mess. And if I can take another slight digression, this is where we start to get into some therapy tactics such as mindfulness, where the idea is if you're panicking, it's recognizing particular thought loops and certain assumptions you have and certain ways of looking at the world that you have that may not be very effective, that may not be very healthy, and understanding them and accepting them. And when you look at the rest of the world, being able to kind of implement them and say, okay, I having this perception, but I'm aware that this is skewed, that this is flawed, and that I'm not really it's not accurate. And that can help because you're always going to have this issue where you don't understand other people or you don't understand the specifics of them, but you can mitigate it quite a bit by kind of putting that little asterisk after everything. So I haven't done a mental health video for a while, but I hope people enjoyed it. God bless everyone. Try to stay safe out there. Try to stay mentally healthy. And lots more good content to come.